let's visualize ourselves surrounded by all sentient beings. So beginning with our mother of this life to our immediate left, and then all of our female friends and family to our left and behind us. And then our father of this life and all our male friends and family to our right and behind us. And then, all the other human beings, all the animals, all the beings of the 6 realms. Imagine them all in human form, seated all around us. And then those whom we find the most difficult to have kindness, compassion for, and who we feel they antagonize us. Imagine these people seated directly in front of us, facing towards us. And feel how oneself is interconnected with all of these beings in this life and from life to life. And how every happiness, ordinary happiness from beginningless time until now, and future happiness up to full enlightenment, all come about in dependence upon these other sentient beings. So then one way to generate a motivation, just briefly, is to think that since every happiness I have, even my body, this life, countless past lives, every happiness I have up to full enlightenment, all comes about in dependence upon other sentient beings who've all been my kind mother, father, friend, family member in the past. Therefore, in order to repay their kindness, I'll use this session in order to work towards reducing and eliminating the causes of suffering of myself and all these other sentient beings, and creating the causes of happiness and well-being of all sentient beings, including myself. And especially seeing that the fundamental cause of all suffering of sentient beings and myself included is ignorance, grasping at inherent existence, grasping at things as existing in a way that they don't. So the purpose of studying the true truths is to generate the wisdom which sees the way that things actually exist, and thereby eliminates this ignorance, which is the fundamental cause of all of our problems. So therefore, in order to benefit all sentient beings, then, and especially in order to quickly become enlightened, in order to be of the greatest possible benefit of for all sentient beings, then I'll engage in this session on the 2 truths as taught by the Buddha. Then if you like, you can visualize Shakyamuni Buddha in the space in front of you. And think how Buddha embodies all positive qualities that is possible for every sentient being to, every sentient being has the same potential to develop. So the Buddha has shown the way through his boundless effort over countless lives as an ordinary being, and as a bodhisattva, as an Arya bodhisattva. And finally, he showed the aspect of achieving full enlightenment of the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya more than 2,500 years ago. And then turned the wheel of Dharma, taught the holy Dharma, which we're studying today. So reflecting how Buddha, who's one nature with our own gurus, how he is an embodiment of the Buddha jewel, or the rare sublime Buddha, the 3 jewels of refuge. The Buddha is an embodiment of the Dharma, the realization of Dharma, due to his own realization of boundless compassion, and especially wisdom realizing emptiness in his mind stream. And then he's an embodiment of the Sangha jewel, because he's achieved the state of an Arya being, of indirectly realized emptiness. And also he shows the aspect of being a fully ordained monk. So seeing Buddha as an embodiment of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, three jewels of refuge, and recognizing how he has, by teaching the Dharma, by leading us to an understanding of the truth, and showing us how to eliminate all of our afflictive obscurations and karma, which are the causes of suffering. Then he shows us how to be free from these, and shows us how to develop positive qualities, wisdom, kindness, compassion, generosity, and so forth. So thereby the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha protect us from suffering of this life, future lives, of all of samsara. So then with such faith, we can go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, just by reciting the most simple kind of version of the refuge in English. I go for refuge to the Buddha, I go for refuge to the Dharma, I go for refuge to the Sangha. I go for refuge to the Buddha, I go for refuge to the Dharma, I go for refuge to the Sangha. I go for refuge to the Buddha, I go for refuge to the Dharma, I go for refuge to the Sangha. And then if you like, you can do the visualization of purification. You can do that from every pore of Buddha's holy body, white light rays radiate out throughout the universe. On the tip of each ray is an emanation of Buddha. And such emanations come to the crown of each sentient being's head, especially one's own. And then from these, white light, like nectar, flows down, filling the bodies of oneself and all sentient beings, purifying them of every suffering of body and mind. So especially COVID-19, other sicknesses, physical sickness completely eliminating, the body's completely healed. And especially sufferings of mind, disturbances of mind from the most subtle to the most strong and powerful are completely dispelled. Their body and mind are completely filled with brilliant, blissful white light. And then from every pore of Buddha's holy body, golden light rays radiate out like weighty golden light rays. Throughout the universe, again, on the tip of each ray is an emanation of Shakyamuni Buddha. Such emanation, one emanation comes to the crown of the head of each sentient being. And from these emanations, golden light, like liquid nectar, like honey, flow down and fill the body and mind of all sentient beings, giving their physical bodies perfect health, energy, sustenance, well-being, and comfort and ease, and filling their minds with positive qualities, enthusiasm, energy, patience, insight, affection for all sentient beings, universal affection, caring, concern. So think that oneself and all of the sentient beings are imbued with all the qualities of a fully enlightened Buddha. So then this emanation of Buddha remains above the crown of one's head during the session, blessing one to generate, and all sentient beings, to generate insight into the teaching of the two truths. Okay, so with that bodhicitta motivation and refuge, we can engage in the actual session. So to review, so we're going through the two truths and kind of going through it slowly, because why not? We have time. We're in no rush. So so we're going through the two truths by going through the definition of the presentation of the two truths, just briefly, according to the main four tenet schools. So we looked at kind of the purpose of studying the two truths, and then how to start getting an idea about the two truths in general. So the main purpose of the two truths is because all of the suffering and dissatisfaction problems that all sentient beings have arise from not understanding the true truths, right? From confusion and ignorance regarding the true truths. So it's because of not understanding the true truths correctly that we create the first two of the Four Noble Truths, right? The truth of suffering, and then the causes of that suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering. Afflictive emotions and karma, our karma, especially negative karma, that are contaminated karma in general, all come about through the ignorance, grasping that inherently existent self, persons, and phenomena. So this ignorance is one aspect of not understanding the true truths. So when we correctly understand the true truths, conventional ultimate truth, then we generate through that we're able to generate the wisdom, realizing the selflessness of the Buddha, and thereby we can eliminate all the causes of samsara, samsaric suffering. So, so that's the main purpose of studying the true truths. Then, sort of a way to start to get an idea about what the meaning of the true truths is to reflect again and again and again on how things, checking to see if the way things appear, is that the way they actually exist in all cases, right? Is it always the case that the way things appear to me, is that reality? Is that true or not, right? So basically Buddha's fundamental teaching in the true truths is that in many, many cases, the way things appear to us is actually not the way things exist. And we can understand that by gaining experience, but especially by using reason and logic to investigate how things exist, actually. So then there's different levels of that difference between the way things appear and the way things actually exist. From very kind of very coarse or gross, meaning very kind of simple things, a simple way of things appear, but they don't actually exist. Kind of simple kinds of mistaken appearance, more and more subtle, more and more kind of difficult to identify, difficult to apprehend, difficult to refute mistaken appearances, right? So there's more and more subtle mistaken appearances. So this is presented according to the four schools, right? So we start with the Great Exposition School, which we looked at, I think, the week before last. Actually, we looked at last week. I think we mostly looked at the Great Exposition School. So, so remember, for the Great Exposition School, their definition of, let's see, I'll share my screen now. We'll look at the definitions again. Remember, their definition of here we are. Conventional truth is the Great Exposition School. The definition of a conventional truth is a phenomena such that an awareness apprehending it is canceled if that phenomena is broken up or mentally separated into its individual parts, right? So remember, the classic example here is like say a porcelain vase, that it looks like. I mean, that phenomena, the porcelain vase, we see it or we can hold it in our hand, but if it drops from our hand to the floor, then the vase is smashed up into pieces and it goes out of existence, right? So why is that a conventional, whereas let's look at the opposite first before I explain each. Shanti, if you have this document, could you upload it to the chat room again in case some
yes,
people.
Venerable.
Thank you. So then compare it to, so remember again, for the Great Exposition, so conventional truth is a phenomena such that an awareness apprehending that phenomena is canceled if that phenomena, so say a vase, right? If that phenomena is broken up, like if we drop a vase, we have an eye consciousness apprehending a porcelain vase or a clay pot, either way. And then if it drop it to the floor, it smashes, right? So that the consciousness apprehending that all of a sudden disappears when the vase is broken up. And then we can also mentally divide things into individual parts, like for example, our stream of consciousness, for example. We have a stream of consciousness now experiencing, different thoughts related to what we're talking about, the two truths. But if we mentally, we can't smash that up into pieces with a hammer or something, or we can't dissolve it into water, but because it's not a physical thing, right? Stream of consciousness. But we can mentally divide it up into parts. There's a first moment, second moment, third moment, and thereby the mind apprehending that stream of consciousness, it disappears, right? Because it focuses on the individual parts and doesn't see the whole anymore. So thereby, consciousness is also a conventional truth because it can be divided up into parts, and because the awareness of that thing, it disappears when it's divided up into parts. So conversely, look at ultimate truth from Great Exposition School as a phenomena. So an ultimate truth is a phenomena such that an awareness apprehending it is not canceled if the phenomena is broken up or mentally separated into its individual parts, right? So here it's kind of a little bit tricky because for Great Exposition School, the main things that are ultimate truths are, first of all, the smallest possible particles. It means partless particles, right? The smallest possible, like maybe, I mean, they didn't know about or use the terms, but like protons, neutrons, electrons, very, very, very small particles that make up all the physical world. So those things, they're called partless particles because they actually don't have parts. So you can't break them, you can't break them down. And you can't mentally divide them up, according to the Great Exposition School, because they don't have parts. Of course, the higher Buddhist tenet schools, they reject that kind of phenomena. They reject that that's possible. But for the Great Exposition School, they believe that there are those kind of smallest possible particles. So that's one kind of ultimate truth for them, ultimate phenomena, you could say. And then another is shortest moments of consciousness. So consciousness exists through time. So they believe that when you mentally divide up, something that exists through time, like consciousness, into parts, you can arrive at the shortest possible moments of consciousness. So here what they mean probably is the shortest possible moments that we're able to perceive, or that someone with clairvoyance, that any ordinary person, besides a Buddha, is able to perceive that short of a moment. That's probably what they mean. But so those things cannot be divided up further. And then you might think of abstract concepts like the number one. But that's a little debatable because like the number one, it's a permanent phenomena. But we can think of, well, 1/2, 2 halves, of 1, 0.5 and 0.5. And then the mind apprehending number one, it goes away, right? It's destroyed. So number one probably is also a conventional phenomenon for them, but I'm not 100% sure, right? But anyway, the main thing to get the idea here of with Great Exposition School is that for them, ultimate phenomena means, and ultimate truth means the most fundamental building blocks of the world, right? Like very small particles or very short, the shortest possible moments of consciousness that we can perceive, that these are the most fundamental kind of things based upon which everything else is constructed, right? And therefore they're ultimate truths because they cannot be further subdivided. When you look at what things actually are, like with physical things, when you look at what they are, you can break them down into smaller, like this book here, the book on my desk. I can break it down into smaller parts, the pages, parts of the pages, the paper, the ink. And if I break down the physical stuff further, finally, what do I arrive at? Smallest possible particles, like the atoms or the subatomic particle or something, right? So for them, these smallest possible particles are the building blocks of the physical world. And then if I look at my mental experience, I can divide it, into different varieties and then smaller and smaller parts. But eventually I arrive at these shortest possible moments of consciousness, which cannot be further subdivided. And that is the most kind of fundamental building blocks of our conscious experience, right? So they basically look at things like that. So that's kind of, they're kind of an outlier. I mean, their way of dividing conventional truth and ultimate truth is quite different. So, I mean, just finally, how to relate that to our experience and how we have mistaken appearances, right? Is kind of, I mean, because we want to remember the two truths are always about how the way things appear to us is not how they actually exist. So like, say this book again, my very old book, when the book appears to us, does it appear as if it's made up of a bunch of particles, very small particles? No, it doesn't. It looks like the book is just one big thing, like one solid thing. I mean, we know it has pages and stuff, but even the pages, it looks like, well, this page, the paper is kind of, it's just paper, right? But then it doesn't look like it's made up of lots and lots of very small particles. But we know, intellectually, we know we can divide it. I mean, physically, we can kind of dissolve the paper. We can cut it up into smaller and smaller bits. And then we can kind of discover, by physically experimenting or by, mentally analyzing, we can discover that actually it's made up of a bunch of really, really small particles, which we cannot see, right? So in that way, the appearance of the book as one solid whole thing is mistaken, right? Because when we analyze, we see that actually it's made up of lots of tiny particles. And because of our knowledge of a little bit of physics, a little bit of chemistry, we also know that actually, like, the book appears to be solid, like it's solid matter, but actually it's mostly space, right? Because it's made up of atoms, and atoms consist of mostly space, right? So, but the Great Exposition School is not talking about that so much, but it's very similar to what they're talking about. What they're talking about really is that any physical thing is made up of lots of, really, really, really small particles, which we cannot see, right? So these physical things, they appear as solid and whole, but actually they're not, right? So that way our appearance is mistaken. And the same with our conscious experience. When we have, memories, we have feelings, we have, thoughts, plans for the future, all of the different conscious experience that we have, it seems like there's big whole, kind of mental experiences that we have. But when we analyze, we can see that those big whole, experiences, whether of hearing something or seeing something or physically feeling something or mentally feeling something, all of those physical experiences are made up of very minute, small experiences that are slightly different from others, right? And we label like a whole experience on it. So we can see that, especially in meditation, we can get a much, much more subtle perception of our own conscious experiences, whether they're of outside physical things or whether they're of our own mind. So again, the Great Exposition School is looking at that fact, that the way our own mind appears to us is actually something different than it actually is when we investigate. When we investigate to see what our conscious experience really is, it's something quite different. For example, many of you I know, have had the experience of, especially when you first start meditating, it seems like there's more thoughts arising in the mind, especially when you're doing a breathing meditation, right? Just trying to still our mind, keep our mind focused on one thing. It seems like there's so many more thoughts arising in our mind than before when we weren't meditating. But actually, that's not the case. It's that we're becoming aware of all these very subtle, fleeting kind of thoughts and perceptions and mental chatter that's there all the time, but usually we're not aware of it, right? So that's is a kind of example of how the Chittamatra are pointing out that the way even our own conscious experience, the way it appears to us ordinarily, is not what is really like. When we analyze more deeply, more subtly, we see that it's something quite different. The reality of our conscious experience is something quite different. Okay, so we discussed that a lot last week, right? So that's just a little review. And then at the end of the session last week, I introduced the Sutra School, right? So the Sutra School is the next higher school. So the Sutra School, their definition of ultimate truth and conventional truth is really the basis for all of the higher schools, right? The mind-only school and then the middle way school later on. They're all kind of, then the Great Exposition School is quite different. But from the Sutra School on up, they're quite similar. Although, yeah, I mean, there is a big difference between the Sutra school and mind-only school. So let's look at the Sutra school again here. The definition of an ultimate truth, so we'll give ultimate truth first. The definition of an ultimate truth is a phenomena that is ultimately able to perform a function, right? Again, a phenomena that is ultimately able to perform a function. So here I'm going to ask for volunteers. What are some phenomena that can perform a function? So you can unmute yourself and answer. You can, if you have an answer. What is a phenomena that can perform a function, and what function does it perform? Anybody? The brave or the shy? Fariza, what do you guess? I can't hear you again, Fariza. I think you have to unplug that.
No, I've got a new headset now. Can you hear me?
I can barely hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. So the phenomena which can function, like, say, for example,
can perform a function. Yeah.
Who can
A
perform
phenomena that can perform a function.
So a flower, like a flower,
Yes.
from a you put a seed and then it grows into a plant and then it blossoms and then it dies. I mean, it disintegrates.
Yeah. So what's just to make it, keep it simple, because you mentioned the seed and then a dead flower, but what function does a flower perform?
The flower has its own color, its own smell, and then
yeah, those are properties it has, but what does it do? What is something a flower does?
To whom? As
Anybody.
a function. Yeah, it gives you a pleasant feeling, no? I mean, when you see it.
Yeah, a more technical way to say that, Fariza, is a flower produces an eye consciousness that sees the colors.
Yeah.
It produces a smell sense consciousness. It produces petals. It gives food to bees. It reflects light. Right? There's so many things a flower does. Yeah. So that's a good example. Someone, let's have one more example.
The vase stores water or stores something.
Yeah, a vase, right? Yeah, a vase, it holds water. It's able to support and contain water, and you can use it to carry water. So the water that's held by the vase is an effect of the vase, right? So it has a function of holding water. I mean, other things to think about are like the earth, like the planet Earth, it supports things that, that can stand on it. Like all the buildings we're in, they're supported by the earth, right? Or the sun, it warms the planet, and it illuminates things. Or like the lights in your room, I can also see you have lights on in your room, none of you sitting in the dark, at least those with the videos on. So the light in your room, it dispels darkness. It illuminates things, and it produces an eye consciousness, which it sees things. Right? So basically, the most fundamental kind of function here in this definition of ultimate truth, according to Sutra school, when it says a phenomena that is ultimately able to perform a function. So, I mean, you don't really, in the definition, you don't really need the word ultimately. It doesn't really, just any function, any phenomena that is able to perform a function is ultimately able to perform a function, at least as far as I know. If someone has a debate for me, they're welcome to debate, but that's basically what it is. So the main function here they're talking about is to produce an effect, right? Anything that can produce effects, like the flower produces, it produces pollen. Like the pollen is an effect of the flower. The flower produces seeds from which more flowers can grow. Those are effects. The eye consciousness seeing the flower is an effect of the flower. Right, for Sutra school. It's different from mind-only school, but for Sutra school, the eye consciousness which sees the flower is an effect of the flower. The smell consciousness which smells the flower is an effect of the flower. So it's true, a flower, it produces change in the world, right? It has an effect on other things. It has an effect on us. It has an effect on bees. has an effect on the air. Yes, Feruza. Unmute yourself and ask. But I think you have to unplug your
Sorry to interrupt, but
Please.
here I just want to ask.
Yes.
So, the definition of ultimate truth is anything which functions, right?
Yes.
According to Sutra school.
Anything which performs a function.
So anything which doesn't perform a function.
Right.
So what is that?
Permanent things.
So yes. So therefore they are trying to say that impermanent things are ultimate truth and permanent things are not.
Exactly. For the Sutra school, all impermanent things are ultimate truths. All permanent things are not.
So like permanent things like your example would be space?
Yeah, uncompounded space is the typical example. The mere absence of a let's see, what I always say, let's say the mere absence of a pig in your room.
The absence of?
A pig.
Oh, pig. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Also, you know, emptiness of, well, for the Sutra school, you'd say emptiness of a substantially existent person. You can say emptiness of a person who's independent of the aggregates. It's a mere negation. Anything that's a mere negation of something, right? Those are permanent things. So those permanent things, because they don't change moment by moment, so they don't have the power to affect other things. You know, like say the absence of a pig in your room, does it produce an eye consciousness? No. Does it produce an ear consciousness? No. Does it even produce a mental consciousness? Like we have a concept which apprehends it, but that it's not like the mere absence of the room is like doing something to affect our mind to bring about that concept, right? It's more like we know that pigs exist. We're in a room, we can see there's no pig. So it's more like our mind, our concept, it's not like it creates the absence of a pig, but it's aware of the absence of the pig. But the action of knowing that comes from the side of our mind. Whereas compared to a flower, like when we see a flower, it's not like we have to just think of flower and then only we see it. It's more like we're walking along and there's this thing out there in the world by the side of the road growing, and it causes an awareness, an eye consciousness, aware of the flower to arise in our mind, right? So it's like, I mean, that's a bit of a subtle difference, right? How external things like a flower, a sound, how a vase, it's like they affect our mind. Like they cast their appearance to our mind. You know, almost like, you know, like the computer screen. It throws its appearance to our mind. Whereas like uncompounded space, or let's say, I mean, more simply, the mere absence of a pig in the room, it's like we have to put an effort to experience that. Now, it doesn't just like, you know, jump up in our face. It's like we have to put an effort to know that. So it's more like the existence of that depends upon our projection of our concepts, right? You can kind of see how, right, that the experience of like a permanent phenomena, it's like the experience of it depends more on, it's like from the side of our mind, right? Our mind apprehends it, but it's like, yeah, it's something merely imputed by our concepts, right? Our concepts impute that mere absence of a pig in the room on, you know, it's not like it's not there. I mean, it is there, but you can see the way it affects us is, I mean, the way we generate awareness of it is totally different than a physical thing like a vase or a flower, or even it's totally different than our thoughts. Even when we have thoughts, you know, when we think of, let's say, even say you think of like the mere absence of a pig in the room, the experience of that thought is I mean, that thought is a conventional phenomenon, right? It performs a function. because it creates a second moment of thought. It creates a memory. It creates there's a self, well, you can say it creates memory. It creates a subsequent thought. But the object of that thought, the mere absence of the pig in the room, is just like this static thing, you know, it's a permanent thing. It's static, it's not changing moment by moment, and it doesn't affect the other things around it, right? It doesn't have any effect on things around it. It's just there, right? Like the flower, it has an effect. Our mind, when we have a feeling or a thought, it has an effect on other aspects of our mind, right? It has like this real power to perform a function, right? To influence other things. Whereas like uncompounded space, emptiness, you know, of emptiness of substantially existent person, the mere absence of a dog in the room, it's like those things, they don't really, they're there, they exist, but the experience of them is, you know, like comes from the side of our mind, and they're merely imputed by the mind, and they don't affect other things in any like substantial way, right? They're just kind of there, static things, and they're not changing moment by moment, right? Yeah, so those are some of the differences. So yeah, let's just look at, because you already led me to it, Firuza. The definition of a conventional truth, then, for Sutra school is a phenomena that is not ultimately able to perform a function. So this is all permanent phenomena, right? So all permanent phenomena are not able to perform a function, whereas all impermanent phenomena are able to perform a function, right? But let me just check. I need to check one thing just to make sure I'm not totally misleading you guys. Because I think, let's check for the Sutra school, what do you think? Is emptiness, meaning selflessness, meaning the absence of a substantially existent person, it seems, you know, for all the other schools, that is a, well, not all the other schools, but that is an ultimate truth, right? For the higher schools, for the mind-only school, middle way school, that selflessness is always an ultimate truth, not a conventional truth. But according to the definitions and the way I'm explaining them, it looks like for the Sutra school, like, okay, all right, Sutra school, ultimate truth, there. Right. See, so for Sutra school, ultimate truth, truly existent thing, a product, a thing, a product, impermanent phenomena, compounded phenomena, a substance, a specifically characterized phenomena are equivalent. For the definition of conventional truth is a phenomena that is not ultimately able to perform a function. So for Sutra school, then conventional truth, falsely existent, permanent phenomena, and generally characterized phenomena are equivalent. Right? So what that means is, which is very kind of strange, it's very counterintuitive, is for the Sutra school, then even, you know, the truth that we have to meditate on to eliminate the ignorance, which is the fundamental cause of samsara, right? So the selflessness of person, right? The emptiness of a substantial existent person. That's the thing we have to meditate on, right? To eliminate samsara. That thing is a conventional truth. It's not ultimate truth, right? So why does that seem strange? I mean, so again, for the Sutra school, even the most important thing for us to realize, emptiness, is not an ultimate truth. It's a conventional truth, right? For all the higher schools, the middle way school and the mind-only school and the middle way school, the most important thing for us to realize and meditate on, emptiness, is of course an ultimate truth, right? Again, for the middle way school, for the mind-only school and the middle way school, of which there's two middle way schools, right? So we'll get to that later. But for the what is it, Chittamatra and Madhyamaka, emptiness, right? The fundamental nature of all phenomena, emptiness, selflessness of person or selflessness of phenomena, is an ultimate truth, right? But for the Sutra school, emptiness is also permanent, right? Emptiness is permanent, and anything that's permanent is not an ultimate truth, right? Instead, it's a conventional truth. So there's a big difference. This is one of the big differences between the Sutra school and the higher schools. Is that for the Sutra school, emptiness or selflessness of persons, selflessness is a conventional truth. For all the higher schools, selflessness is an ultimate truth. Right? Okay, Teresa?
So you mean to say that for Sutra school, the selflessness of phenomena is the ultimate truth, whereas the selflessness of person is not?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
So can you define to me with Sutra school with phenomena and person? With regard to this context, these two.
For Sutra school, there's only selflessness of phenomena. That's the only thing there is. There is no selfless, sorry, I'm gonna mix you up. For Sutra school, there is no selflessness of phenomena. There's only selflessness of person, right? For the Sutra school, there's only selflessness of persons, right? There is no selflessness of phenomena. Because for the Sutra school, the only selflessness that they talk about is there's two actually, but they both have to do with the person. There's a gross one and a subtle one. There's a gross, for the Sutra school, there's a gross selflessness of person and a subtle selflessness of person, right? So the gross selflessness of person, which means not that it's something disgusting or looks ugly or tastes bad, but that it is more coarse. It's more easy to understand, right? So for the Sutra school, the gross selflessness of person is the fact that a person is not permanent, is not heartless, and is not does not exist without depending on causes and conditions, right? So basically, for the Sutra school, there's no permanent person, right? So it means there's no unchanging kind of soul or self that goes from life to life and eventually achieves nirvana. But rather, what a person is something that's changing all the time, right? So that lack of a permanent person is the gross selflessness of persons. So now the subtle selflessness of person is something a little more subtle, right? Of course, it's a little more difficult to understand. So for the Sutra school, the subtle selflessness of person is the lack of I'll give you the term first. The lack of a substantially existent person. You can put your headphones in now because you don't need to speak. Then you don't have to put your ear up to the camera. So then for the Sutra school, the subtle selflessness of person is the fact that a person, there's no substantially existent person, right? So what does substantially existent mean? It means, well, substantially existent would mean that, within our body and mind, there's some substance that you can find that is a real person, right? And that person, it controls our body and mind. So for the Sutra school, substantially existent person means kind of like there's something that's not our body and not our mind and does not depend upon our body and mind, but there's some essential person that controls our body and mind. Just like a king controls his ministers, or like a prime minister controls the finance minister and the health minister and the foreign affairs minister. So for the Sutra school, the substantially existent person, if it existed, so it doesn't, right? If it did, it would be like the prime minister, and our aggregates would be like the junior ministers, right? Or the substantially existent person would be like the king, and the aggregates, our body and mind and all our thoughts, would be like the ministers, right? They would be controlled by that. But for the Sutra school, when you search for that kind of thing, that kind of person that controls our body and mind, you cannot find anywhere. There's nowhere in the body you can find that thing. There's nowhere in the mind. It's not separate from our body and mind, so it doesn't exist, right? So for them, that lack of a substantially existent person is the subtle selflessness of persons, right? And there is no selfless, they don't talk about selflessness of phenomena. There is no such thing. But I mean, I should add, I hope I don't confuse it further, but it's good to know. They do talk about that all phenomena are empty of a substantially existent person, right? So to come to my book again, my book, it has emptiness. There's a selflessness of the book, right? But for the Sutra school, what that means is that the person who uses the book, right, or owns the book is empty of a substantially existent person. That's what they mean, right? They don't mean anything more than that, right? Okay. But the main point I wanted to make here was that well, yeah. The main one little point I wanted to make here is just for the Sutra school, the selflessness of person, which is the main thing we need to understand and meditate on, that is not an ultimate truth. It's a conventional truth for them. Why? Because it is a permanent phenomenon, right? So just look at the definition again, and then I'll add another point. So Sutra school, the definition of an ultimate truth is a phenomena that is ultimately able to perform a function, right? So that means all impermanent phenomena. So for them, impermanent phenomena, functioning thing, compounded phenomena, cause, effect, those are all one meaning. They all mean the same thing. So all causes, all effects, all causes are ultimate truths. All effects are ultimate truth. All matter, material things are ultimate truth. All consciousness, experiences of consciousness are ultimate truth. All the sounds are ultimate truth. All things we see are ultimate truth. All things we taste are ultimate truths. Persons, as a person, we're ultimate truth. So, but why is that? You know, for Sutra school, why is it that for them, the things we can see and hear and smell and taste and touch and the thoughts and feelings we have, why are those ultimate truths for them? The reason is like this, is basically because those are things we directly experience. You know, you think about a flower, we actually experience it. We see it. We can smell it. We can touch it, right? And or like a vase, like Archana gave the example of a vase that holds water. You know, we can see the vase. We can touch the vase. We can directly experience it. It's not just something that's in our mind that we think about. It's something we can really see and feel and touch. Also our feelings, our feeling of happiness, our feeling of sadness, even our thoughts that we have. Those are things that, you know, they have a reality that's powerful enough to make an imprint on us, to appear to us, right? So for the Sutra school, the things we directly experience, that's reality. Whereas, you know, the things we can only access by thinking about, by intellectualizing about, by having concepts about, those things are not as real, right? Those things are just kind of in our mind. They're just objects of our concepts. So they're not like as real as the things we can directly experience. So the main thing we're coming to here is for the Sutra school, direct perceivers, right? So there's two different kinds of consciousness, direct perceivers and conceptual consciousness, right? So for the Sutra school, direct perceivers. So the best example of direct perceivers is like, you know, our eye sense consciousness, our ear sense consciousness, our tongue sense consciousness, our body sense consciousness. Whenever we see things, that eye consciousness, seeing shapes and colors and seeing things, that's a direct perceiver, right? There's no need for concepts there. We just see things as they are. When we hear sounds, that ear sense consciousness, it's a direct perceiver. It hears the sounds of the dog. It hears the sounds of the voice. It hears the sounds of the rain. It experiences the world that is real, right? So for them, and when we, well, Yeah. So for them, our sense consciousness are very reliable, right? They give us access to kind of reality. And I mean, I should add again, for the sutra school, but there's all, well, maybe before I go off on the next point. So what about, for the sutra school also, and for all the higher schools, our mental consciousness, for us ordinary beings, our mental consciousness, for us, it's mostly concepts, right? We mostly have conceptual consciousness. When we have a memory of something, when we think about the future, when we make plans, those are all conceptual consciousness. The objects of our concepts are, well, basically they're projections of our own mind, right? Meaning that the way a conceptual consciousness works is that, you know, think like now I was talking about like pigs earlier, the absence of a pig in your room. Just think of a pig right now, right? Because none of us have a direct perceiver of any pigs around us, I hope, right? None of us can see or smell or taste any pigs around us right now. So if we think of a pig, that's a conceptual consciousness. But how is it that we can think of a pig? How do we do that, right? Well, basically what we do when we think of a pig is we can remember a time when we saw pigs in the past. We can remember a specific time. But even there, what we do, or we can just think of general pig. But what we do there is we eliminate everything that's not pig, right? So we eliminate,
I think Plexiglass connection is lost.
Hi, I'm back. Sorry, my internet connection cut out.
Hi.
Maybe, yeah, let's try. So when we think of a pig, what appears to our mind is, it's called a meaning generality, is the technical term, a meaning generality. So when we think of pig, basically what we do is we mentally eliminate everything that's not pig, and then what appears to our mind is the opposite of not pig, right? So that is, it's not like there's any real pig appearing to our mind. It's our mentally projected, basically, concept of pig, right? So you can see how that's something just made up by our mind. It's not nearly as rich in experience as if we actually see a pig, right? If we actually see a pig, everything about the pig appears to us. Its shape, its color, its smell, the way it moves, you know, the hairs on the pig, all kinds of, you know, the legs, the ears, the snout, you know, all kinds of things about the pig appear to the direct perceiver that sees or smells or hears a pig, right? But when we think of a pig, the experience is not nearly as rich, right? It's just kind of like this static appearance, this static concept of pig appears to our mind, but not like with all the detail, like not with the smell, not with all the hairs, not with the movement, not with, you know, all the different parts. It's just this static concept of pig appears. So you can see how for Chittamatra, that's not reality. That's just a projection of our mind. Like, so for them, the objects of our concepts are just these permanent phenomena, which, you know, their existence depends upon projection. It's just mental projection, and it doesn't have the ability, it doesn't change. Those things which appear to our concepts, they don't change moment by moment. They don't have the power to affect other things. They don't have a power to give rise to direct perception of them, right? Whereas external things like flowers or vases or pigs, they have they appear to our mind with so much richness, right? They change, they perform a function in that they produce effects, which means they change other things in the world, they affect other things in the world, and especially they affect our mind. They cause different perceptions to arise in our mind, right? From outside, right? So basically, so here again, there's this difference between ultimate phenomena, which just means everything that's impermanent, versus conventional phenomena, which is everything that is, sorry, did I say impermanent or permanent? I forgot. Ultimate phenomena, which means everything that is impermanent, right? Versus conventional phenomena, which for them is everything that is permanent. Ultimate phenomena are perceived by direct perceivers. You know, things we directly experience with our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body. Permanent phenomena or conventional phenomena are things we only experience with our concepts for the most part, right? So it's important to see that there's this sense that our direct perceivers are more, right? Whereas our concepts don't. Our concepts we cannot trust, right? But then, so just to add one more thing, which will help us understand the higher schools, is that, well, is every direct perceiver we have a sense consciousness, right? An eye, ear, nose, tongue, or body consciousness? No. We can also develop mental direct perceivers, right? So when we meditate on something like selflessness, again and again and again, or we generate very good concentration and we generate clairvoyance, we can also have direct experience of things with our mental consciousness alone, not relying on our sense consciousness. So maybe the simplest example of this is clairvoyance. So, you know, if we generate really good concentration, then we can like read other people's minds, for example. That's a direct experience. You know, we can have a mental direct experience of what other people are thinking, or what's going on in a very distant place. Or we can have a premonition about what's happening in the future. And I mean, for Sutra school, maybe also our dreams. When we dream at night, it's a mental experience, right? The dream consciousness is a mental experience. But for them, that's probably a mistaken appearance. I mean, it's mistaken consciousness, whereas direct perceivers are always valid, are always unmistaken consciousness, right? Anyway, if I get into too many things, it'll get too much confusing, right? So if we just stick with that for now. So again, for Sutra school, all impermanent phenomena are ultimate truths. And the primary the best kind of consciousness to rely upon to know reality is our direct perceivers, right? The main direct perceivers are sense consciousness, but through meditation, we can also generate mental direct perceivers. Then conventional phenomena are all permanent phenomena. They're not as real, right? So therefore, they're not ultimate truths. So all permanent things are conventional truths, which is not as reliable, right? Because the way our conceptual consciousness engages with things is in a very static way, right? It's not nearly as rich as direct perceivers, right? Yeah, so like that. So yeah, we don't have that much time left now. So if you have some questions, I should answer your questions before I go. Mind-only school. Saket, is that you?
Yep, that's me.
Hi, Saket. What's your question?
So the Sutra school, what is their version of a direct perception of emptiness?
Yeah, very good question. So yeah, so for Sutra school, a direct perception of emptiness, well, we have to start with the conceptual perception of emptiness, right? When we first understand emptiness, we have an intellectual understanding, right? And then we meditate it on again and again and again. So we have a conceptual mind, conceptual consciousness, understanding emptiness. But then because it's the nature of even our mind that the more we engage our mind with an object, the more and more clearly the object appears to our mind, right? So we start with the conceptual consciousness, apprehending selflessness, and then we meditate on it again and again and again, right? And we combine that with generating good concentration, right? So we totally focus all of our mental energy into this conceptual understanding of emptiness, and we accumulate merit, we purify our negative karma and our obscurations, and then gradually that conceptual consciousness, understanding selflessness, it becomes a direct perceiver, a mental direct perceiver, right?
This we you mean Prasangikam, the middle school?
Yeah, I mean, that aspect of, beginning meditation on selflessness with a conceptual consciousness, and that conceptual consciousness becoming a direct perceiver through the force of meditation is the same for all the schools. Yeah, so it's the same for the mind-only school, it's the same for Prasangika school, it's the same for everyone. Right?
And no, well, then what is Sutra school meditating on if the final reality is visible to them, and whatever is visible is final, is the actual reality? Then what are they striving for? Then
Yeah. That's a very good question. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying though. For them, that's what I was trying to make the point earlier. It's very strange. For them, the most important thing to understand, selflessness, which is the thing that only by understanding that can we eliminate samsara, that thing is not an ultimate truth for them, right? So yeah, I was saying it's strange. I mean, I agree it's strange. That's why I had to go back to the tenets book to check, right? To make sure like that's really right, because it doesn't seem right. But that's the case for them. So although for them, yeah, it's true that the things that are more real are things we can directly perceive with our sense consciousness. At that point, they're not really talking about why we suffer or not. They're more just talking about what kind of consciousness can we believe? So it's true, it's strange. They feel like our concepts are not as reliable, but the concept, you could say they kind of make an exception. For the concept understanding selflessness, yeah, that's reliable. That's really important for them.
That too is the selflessness of the person, not the selflessness of a phenomena.
Okay, I'm back. So yeah, it is strange that for the Sutra school, the main thing to meditate on, selflessness of person, which is going to eliminate all suffering, that's not an ultimate truth. That's a conventional truth. Yeah. It's just different than the other schools, yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe there's something deeper to it than that, but I don't know. That's kind of what my understanding of it. Archana, you have a question?
Okay.
Or anybody else?
Yeah, here, so a sutra here means the Sautantrika school, is it?
Sautantrika, yes, I think so.
And so the Arahat of the Sutra school realizes selflessness of person, the first two levels that you talked about, that is selflessness of permanent, unitary, independent, and autonomous substantial self. Those two.
Yeah, there's two, right? The emptiness of a permanent, unitary, own-powered, or self, and the emptiness of a substantially existent, autonomous self. I think I don't remember the terms exactly, but
yeah. So basically, they are trying to realize the conventional truth and not the ultimate.
Yeah, exactly. They're meditating on the conventional truth. Yeah.
And for them, all direct perceivers are important, including the mental direct perceiver, I think so. Because the mental direct perceiver will realize the emptiness of the self, right?
You know, maybe I can't hear you, Achana. Maybe could everyone turn off your video who's not asking a question? Because my internet connection is really weak. So
I was just saying that all direct perceivers are important to them, including the mental direct perceiver. And they are
yes.
using the mental direct perceiver to realize emptiness of the person.
Yeah, they want to get to that. Yeah, that's at that point when they generate, for any of the schools, when a meditator is able to generate a mental direct perceiver realizing selflessness, at that point they become an Arya being, right? At that point, that's where they transform from being an ordinary being to an Arya being.
Yeah, so the ultimate and conventional for them, I guess it's just a terminology thing.
Yeah, it's not related to like what is the most important kind of truth. It's really more related to what kind of phenomena in general are more reliable, are more kind of real in a way. I mean, maybe it's helpful to know that, you know, for the Sutra school, as opposed, I mean, to contrast like the Sutra school with the mind-only school. So for the Sutra school, you know, the things we can see, like flowers and vases, the things we touch and hear, those are external, those have an external reality, right? They exist outside, apart from our mind, right? Whereas for the mind-only school, the things that appear as if they have an external reality, those are actually just projections of our mind, just like a dream, right? So for the Sutra school, it's like the flower, it exists whether anybody sees it or not, it doesn't matter. It exists out there as a real thing on its own.
From its own side.
And then we just come along and we experience the flower, right? But for the mind-only school, it's much more like, you know, think about, you know, if you just think about science, I mean, just according to modern science even, like the colors of the flower, where does that color actually exist? Actually, the color that we perceive is a product of both light that's reflecting off the flower. You know, so basically the sunlight, which has 5 colors, you know, in it, it has this whole, what is it, range of colors. It shines on the flower. The flower absorbs some of those wavelengths of light and reflects others. The ones that are reflected, they meet our eye. And then, you know, they come into our eye, and then our eye activates our optic nerves. And then this experience of color is produced. But it's not that the color is actually on the flower, right? It's really, the color is something we experience as a kind of interaction between light coming from the flower and the way in our eyes and our optic nerves. So, I mean, in that way, the color, it looks like the color is really out there, but actually it's not. And the same with the sounds, you know, tastes. You know, we taste a certain, you know, taste, we have an experience of taste from certain food, but it's not like the food actually possesses that flavor. You know, that flavor we experience arises from the meeting of, you know, the certain chemicals in the food with our tongue and the way our, you know, the nerves in our tongue experience that, right? So, but for the Sutra school, it's not like that. For the Sutra school, the flavors are actually out there. They're possessed by the object. The color is the object has that color, and it just casts that appearance on our mind. It's more like that. So that's why for them, like the objects, impermanent things, which have the ability to produce our experience. They have an ability to change and produce other things. They have this kind of power to change other things. That is more real than anything that's just an object of our concepts, right? Like permanent things are.
So how are they different from Vaibhashika? That is only, they are looking at permanent, unitary, independent.
Yeah, because remember for Vaibhashika, it's true that for Vaibhashika, everything that is an ultimate truth. Well, yeah, it's probably true. Anyway, for Vaibhashika, they're just looking at it differently. They're looking more like, what are the smallest building blocks of everything? Right? What are the things that you cannot physically break down? You can't physically break down into smaller parts, or mentally break into smaller parts.
No, I was referring to the selflessness of person.
Yeah, so for Vaibhashika, the selflessness of person is probably a ultimate
just the
truth.
gross.
Let me check. Let's look at our text, because I don't remember. Clearly. Let's see if it says. It'll have examples of both. No. Oh, yeah. Uncompounded phenomena. Yeah. So for the great exposition school, Vaibhashika, uncompounded phenomena, which means permanent things, are all ultimate truths because they cannot be broken down. And awareness apprehending it is not canceled if it is broken up or mentally separated into individual parts. So illustrations of ultimate truths are directionally partless particles, temporally partless moments of consciousness, and uncompounded phenomena, right? So for Vaibhashika, all permanent things are ultimate truths. So it's directly opposite to the Sutra school, or to Satantrika. For them, all permanent things are conventional truths. For Vaibhashika, all permanent things are ultimate truths.
But they both try to realize selflessness of person, and that is slightly different.
Yeah, they both emphasize the importance of realizing selflessness of persons. I mean, that's all Buddhist schools, except selflessness of phenomena. The selflessness in general, and they all accept selflessness of persons, right? But for Vaibhashika, selflessness of persons means emptiness of a permanent, partless, own-powered self. Right? They don't accept the emptiness of a substantially existent self. That's different. That's Sutra school and up.
Thank you, Venerable.
We have time for one more question, or we meditate. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Sorry, another one question just popped in my head.
Sure.
Is then what do you have to say about the rebirth in terms of Vaibhashika and Sautantrika school? So although all Buddhist schools, they accept rebirth, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So in that sense, like, even if Vaibhashika is saying that everything is on permanent, so, and they do believe in life and
Hold
life.
on, who's saying everything is permanent?
No. For them, the ultimate truth is all the permanent. For Vaibhashika, for the Great Exposition School.
Right. Yeah, Vaibhashika, Great Exposition School, same thing.
So for them, it is the ultimate truth is everything is. You can find out exactly that nothing can be separated. You can find out ultimately you can find one part. A partless particle exists, right? For them.
Yes, for them, partless particles exist. Yeah, and so for them, ultimate truths, you can kind of think of three different things, right? Partless particles,
Yeah.
shortest moments of consciousness,
Yeah, correct.
and permanent, all permanent things.
So can you link me up with this with rebirth for them? For what is their view on that?
I mean, they believe a person, it's the person, the person goes from life to life. So for them, I mean, I'm a little rusty on Vaibhashika, but there is okay, there's no permanent person, right? But there's an impermanent person, right? There's an impermanent person that is changing moment by moment, but there's a stream of, the person has a stream of awareness, a stream of consciousness. And together with that, there's a stream of something being a person, right? Remember what the Sutra school negated. Their subtle selflessness of persons is the negation of this substantially existent person, right? Which is like a king which rules the ministers, right? So for the Sutra school, substantially existent person, if it existed, remember I said it would be like this king, which it'd be like this thing that is somehow in our body and mind that controls our body and mind, right? But it's not the body, it's not the mind, it's not separate from those, but it's some substance that is with, it's kind of within our aggregates, but it controls our body and mind. But for the Sutra school, there is no such thing. For the Vaibhashika school, there is, right? For the Vaibhashika school, there is a substantially existent person. So it's that substantially existent person, which is kind of like this, it's like this thing which, controls our body and mind. That is a person, right? One way to get a sense of, because we have an innately arising kind of grasping at this kind of person, right? So imagine, like, there's this thought experiment that's commonly kind of described to help us get a sense of how we have that grasping at a substantially existent person. Is, imagine someone who maybe, you find you would like they have some like qualities that you really like, that you really envy, right? So imagine someone has a body maybe that you envy, someone who's maybe younger or more, more attractive or more famous, or someone who has a mind that you envy, or a life that you envy. And then imagine if you could just exchange your body with their body, right? Or your mind with their mind, right? Right? There's kind of a sense that we could maybe do that. Not that we know really we can't, right? But there's a sense that, oh, if I could only have their body, or I could only have, really their body. It's like, if I could exchange my body with their body, or I could exchange my life with their life. So there's a sense that there's an I that is somehow exists independently from our body and controls it. Like as a person, we do control our body. There's no question about that. But there's a sense that there's like this substantial kind of stuff, that is a substantial person that like controls our body and mind, that doesn't rely upon our body. So that our body is just like a set of clothes, that we could give to someone else and we could take theirs. Like we can exchange our clothes with someone else, right? It's no big deal, because we can just take them off and give them to them, and they can give us theirs, and we exchange. So we kind of have a sense that we could do the same with our body, that we could just like kind of give our body to someone else, and then they could give theirs to us, and then we just carry on as before, right? So that kind of thinking about that, it kind of gets at how there's a sense that there's this kind of person that has this substantial existence that doesn't really rely upon, it has a body, we have a body and we use the body, but we don't really rely upon it. We have a mind and we use our mind, but we don't really rely upon it for our existence. We have this kind of independent existence from those two, right? So that we could kind of give them away and exchange them with others, just like we can other possessions that we have. So for the Sutra school, there is, they negate that, right? They investigate, they find there is no such thing. For the Vaibhashika school, actually, there is that kind of thing, right? They believe there is that kind of person, right? So, yeah, so in that, so it's that substantially existent person that is the main thing which takes rebirth, goes from life to life. You know, I mean, but it's interesting, maybe just to help you get a little bit more, a better, clear idea of what we mean by a substantially existent person. And I mean, hopefully in one way, hopefully it'll make it a little bit more clear. In another way, there's a danger you get more confused. But I mean, that's always the case, right? Whenever we learn about something new. So for the Sutra school, right, their main object of negation is a substantially, let me see, let me look at the document again, just to make sure I get my terminology right. I mean, this is the tenets document. We uploaded last week. Maybe Shanti, if you still have it, could you upload it again? No?
Yes, Venerable, let's share it with everyone, the documents.
Yeah, you can share it with everyone.
And also the for the document session.
I mean, I'm just trying to skip down to their emptiness. They give a big presentation of different kinds of awareness in this here. Okay, so their way is 6, their way of asserting selflessness. The person being empty of a permanent, unitary, independent is asserted to be the coarse selflessness of persons, right? That's what I explained earlier. But here what we're talking about is the person being empty of a self-sufficient, substantially existent. It is asserted to be the the subtle selflessness of persons, right? So a self-sufficient, right? So think about how a king is, you know, he is the king irrespective of the ministers, right? It's like the king is, I mean, the king is like, you know, he's something totally different than the ministers, right? He's made the king not by the ministers, but by, you know, by his birth, right? Or like think about how like the prime minister, he's elected by the people, right? I think. I mean, maybe like I'm not sure how it works in India. He's elected by, is he elected prime minister? Or he's chosen by the party? Archana?
Not by the voters, but by the elected representatives. Their leader becomes the
Okay, so by certain elected representatives, he's made the prime minister. But then let's just imagine he chooses his cabinet though. So his existence doesn't depend upon the cabinet members. It's not like they make him the prime minister. There's some other force, right?
Yeah.
So, and then he controls them. Imagine he controls the ministers. I don't know if he really does, but like a king controls his subjects. So the self-sufficient here means like that if, I mean, because this is, Vaibhashika believes this does exist. Sutra school and all the higher schools are saying there is no such thing, right? But there's this idea that there's this person which doesn't depend upon my body and mind, but just controls them and uses them and takes a new body and takes a new mind with each rebirth, kind of. So there's something, but it's not permanent, right? Remember, for Vaibhashika, it's not permanent, it's not partless, it's made of parts, it's impermanent, it's changing, it has causes and conditions, but it's not dependent upon the body and mind, it controls those, right? So for the Sutra school, they negate this self-sufficient, substantially existent person. Hold on. So what the point I was getting at though is for the Sutra school though, there is actually a substantially existent person. Not self-sufficient, but substantially existent. So what is that? That is the mental consciousness that goes from life to life. So they called it senchi in Tibetan. I have to say it in Tibetan first because I never used it in English, right? Senchi iki number shiva. So there's a mental consciousness which is an example of a person. So what it means is for the Sutra school, and it's the same for the mind-only school, it's the same for the autonomous middle way school, that there's a mental consciousness that goes from life to life. There's a stream of mental consciousness which goes from life to life, unbroken, right? So there's an unbroken stream of mental consciousness which goes from life to life, and that is substantially existent, right? Which means it's got like a substance, right? When you analyze to see what it is, you have this, this stuff, this substance, which is like mental consciousness. Whereas when you analyze to see what a person is, there is no substance stuff that is like person, right? When you analyze to see what a person is, you find a collection of body and physical parts, a collection of consciousness and conscious parts. The body is not a person. The conscious, all the different kinds of consciousness, they're not a person. But the person exists independent upon those, right? So it's not substantially existent. Whereas when you analyze to see your stream of mental consciousness, what it is, all you find is shortest moments of mental consciousness, right? So the fundamental building blocks of mental consciousness are mental consciousness. Therefore, it's substantially existent. It's not that it's just labeled upon other stuff that is not mental consciousness. It is labeled upon the most fundamental parts of mental consciousness are mental consciousness. Therefore, it has like a real substance. Whereas when you analyze a person, what you find is a bunch of collection of stuff that's not a person. Therefore, that kind of person. So for them, there's basically it's called, what is it? Ganzat Zeyo and Ganzat Dayo. Means there's like a merely imputed person, which is the ordinary person that we usually talk about. And then there's a substantially existent person, which is the stream of mental consciousness that goes life to life for Sutra school, right? And this is the same for mind-only school. It's the same for the autonomous middle way school. Now, when you get to the consequentialist school, the Prasangika is different, right? And we'll discuss that later. Okay, so this is our big review of tenets for today. And we're out of time. And you're probably out of mental energy. So let's all relax for 6 days. And then we meet again Tuesday. So before, let's dedicate whatever merit we've created. Well, maybe, so the way to meditate on this, take the definitions I've given you. Meditation, the definition of ultimate truth and conventional truth according to Vaibhashika school, and try to think that you're a Vaibhashika. Try to put your mind in the worldview of a Vaibhashika, right? Try to think and see the world the way they see it. What is ultimate truth for them? What is conventional truth for them? Why? Why not? And then really try to imagine that, and then try to imagine, also their selflessness of person. And then once you get that view, so for each, the way to come to a more and more subtle understanding of the true truths is to try to understand the worldview of the different tenet schools, starting with the most simple. So starting with Vaibhashika, try to make sense of what they're saying in your own experience, and imagine you're a Vaibhashika. How did the Vaibhashikas see the world? For them, what is ultimate truth? What is conventional truth? Why or why not? And then, so the Vaibhashika, they negate, what they're negating really, remember what I said is they negate a person that is permanent, that is partless, and that is independent, meaning it does not depend on causes and conditions. So why do they negate that kind of person? Because that's the kind of person that the non-Buddhists assert exists, right? That's the kind of person that basically the Hindus. Hindus is kind of a difficult, a problematic term, but basically the non-Buddhist philosophers, in ancient India, it's kind of like the Christians and the Muslims, Abrahamic religions now, they kind of assert the existence of this soul, right? A person, there's this essential thing that is not changing moment by moment. It's not made up of parts. It's unitary, right? It's not, it doesn't depend upon cause and conditions, right? So whether an individual, practitioner of Christianity or Islam or whatever, or Hindu does or is not is a different question. But kind of general philosophical view, and whether it's related with the Hinduism or Christianity or Islam or whatever, it doesn't matter, right? But what they're rejecting is, the Vaibhashika are rejecting is this non-Buddhist idea of what a person is, right? Which is that it's something permanent, partless, and not dependent on causes and conditions, right? That it has this kind of, that kind of existence. So the Vaibhashika reject this non-Buddhist view of a person. So then you put yourself in the worldview of a Vaibhashika. And you understand that as best you can. Then you move up to the Sutra school. And so you think about, what is the Sutra school? What is their definition of ultimate truth? What's their definition of conventional truth? And try to imagine how they divide up everything in the world into ultimate truths, conventional truths, and what does that mean for them, right? And then in terms of selflessness, what kind of self that the Vaibhashika accept do the Sutra school reject, right? So the Sutra school reject this, self-sufficient, substantially existent person, right? The Vaibhashika will accept that. The Sutra school reject it, right? So then you think about that. And then you go on. Then you go on to the middle way school view, and then up and up and up, right? So that's what we'll do slowly. That's how to meditate on the true stuff. So let's just briefly dedicate now. So I think whatever merit we've created by looking at the Buddhist teachings on the true truths, according to the different schools, then through the force of this merit, may our gurus have long and stable lives, and may they continue to teach us until samsara ends. May all sentient beings be free from every form of suffering, and have every form of well-being, from physical health up to full enlightenment. And may all of our actions not cause the slightest harm to any living creature whatsoever, but only bring benefit, prosperity, and well-being to all creatures. May the Buddha Dharma spread and flourish. And may there be fully qualified upholders of the Buddhist teachings far, far, far into the future. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Okay, thank you all. Very good questions today. You're listening very well. So
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Try to think about these things a little bit until next week.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Shanti.
Thank you, Venerable.
CKSL, thank you. Okay, bye-bye.